Hi, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, I've got a terrific guest on my show today. His name is Paul Roland. And we're going to talk about how to body experience them, and maybe a bit later on, maybe about paranormal, ghosts, and lots of different things on the show today. Can we please welcome Paul to the show? Hello there.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me, Bob. Great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. When did this experience happen in your life? Had you ever believed in out-of-body experiences before it happened?
Well, actually, I was a child. I was only about 6 years old when it happened, so I hadn't thought about it before then. But the great thing about it was a very natural experience. It wasn't a phenomenon. I woke up out of a dream, and I found myself floating across the sea, flying.
Oh, right.
It's quite a very common experience, apparently. And so I took it all in my stride, if you like, and it was exhilarating. It was a very, very positive, happy experience. And I was very conscious of where I was, that this was happening to me. It wasn't something that could possibly have been a dream. This is the great thing about it, really. And I saw myself floating above, but above my grandmother and my aunt, who were in Ireland at the time. I was in England. So I think it was simply the emotional desire to make sure they were okay, and the emotional connection with them that triggered this.
Right.
And once I saw that they were fine, I remember the sensation of coming back into my body, this falling sensation that a lot of people feel just before they wake up, and they assume, it's just that they're coming out of a dream. But when you actually experience the falling sensation, this is you coming back into your body. Now, so I was awake and acutely aware of what was happening to me, and saying to myself, this is real, this is real. Please don't think this is a dream when you wake up, because it's not. And then it didn't happen again until I was, I think maybe in my 30s or something. But it started to happen, in the middle of the night. I'd wake up and find myself in another part of the house.
Oh.
But unfortunately, so it's a very natural thing. But unfortunately, being an adult, then your consciousness comes in. Oh, there might be something nasty out there, and you can't stop yourself. You jump back into your body again, which is very frustrating, because you want to explore, you want to see,
Of course you do.
where you go, yeah. And so it was happening spontaneously and naturally, but I couldn't control it as an adult until one day I woke up. I still had my eyes closed. I think this is important, because I think if you have your eyes open and you realize where you are, you snap out of it. But I had my eyes, I came out of sleep, I had my eyes closed, and I found myself floating very, very slightly above my body, and I could hover in and out at will. And I did this for quite a few minutes, and I said to myself, go on, don't be frightened. There's nothing to be frightened out there. Go on, this is your great chance. No, of course, in the end, the adult says, oh no, I'm not going to do this, matey, in case I can't get back. So that was rather frustrating. But I feel it's something we all can do, but a lot of people are frightened of it because they think what might be out there. They're conditioned, I think, to imagine all sorts of terrible things, because the media paints the supernatural, the paranormal, as something unnatural.
They make it worse than what it is.
Well, there's nothing worse. There is nothing to be negative about. This is the supernatural is simply an extension of the natural world. It's when we all die, and when we all die, we all experience the same thing. And when we come back, it's basically that in reverse. This umbilical cord that you have, that's physical when you're born, is actually what would you call it? An extension of the astral cord, if you want to call it that binds the dream body, if you want to call it that, to our physical body. So when we're born, there's the physical. I want a version of this. I can't think of the word at the moment. Because basically what we are is, those little Russian dolls, one inside the other. That's basically what we are. So the outer shell is this physical body that we have, and we think that's the reality, that's the only us, but it isn't, because inside is what some people call the dream body or the astral body or whatever you want to call it. I mean, apparently 57 cultures, I believe, throughout the ages have all shared this same belief. That's why the Egyptians, for example, had the various coffins one inside the other, and they believed that on death that your spirit is released and you go into the afterlife. So I mean, all these different cultures, even some, dare I call them primitive, what I mean is not Western civilization cultures in the jungle somewhere, you'll find that they share a similar belief. They'll call it something very different, but this experience seems to be common to human beings, but we've expressed it in different ways. And as I said, when I experienced it, it was liberating. It was a great pleasure, and it took all the fear out of the unknown. And I didn't waste the rest of my life arguing with myself or anybody else, is there life after death? Because I knew there was. I hadn't had a near-death experience, admittedly.
That's one of my questions.
Did
you feel fear, calmness, curiosity, or something else?
I didn't feel curiosity until I came back, and then the big question was, what does this signify? So I had the answer: yes, we're more than the physical body. Yes, that means we must be able. If I can go out during my lifetime and come back several times, then surely when I die, it's just the permanent severing of that umbilical cord, or the silver cord, I think they call it actually. And
that's it.
Right, then where you go after that, we could all argue about it. Although I think I gather the consensus is it's a very happy place. We call it heaven or paradise, but it seems to be a reflection, if you like, of this world. In other words, as above, so below, as they say. So it's a flower garden. Now this is presumably not a physical place, but it is a real place. It's just not our reality, our solid, bang on wood reality that we live in at the moment. And so I don't have any fear. I mean, obviously, I'm not in a hurry to die, and I don't want to die in a nasty way. No, that wouldn't be good. But whenever I've taught workshops or written books, my primary purpose is to take the fear out of the unknown, because I think so many people are, if not frightened, well, they're frightened of their own shadow, really, because all that's out there is yourself. I mean, ghosts are only people who aren't in their body anymore. But I think if let's changing the subject slightly or extending it, I think if you're talking about this and the connection with ghosts, I think most people go further to this through the tunnel into the light and to this other world until they're maybe reborn. But ghosts who linger here, the ones who might cause trouble or who are troubled, I think are simply people who can't let go, because, well, you have the people who are drug addicts or alcoholics or whatever they are, that holds them to the earth, and that's a very sad thing for them. But they can be freed by people who know how to. Right. So that's all I think. I think ghosts can't do you any harm, so they're nothing to be frightened of. They're simply lost people, or they're very disturbed people. They could be violent people. They could be, as I say, very psychologically damaged people who have gone on into the other life with that same attitude, because you don't just cast that off. I think that's where the idea of purgatory and hell might come from. It's a state of mind, not a place, in which you struggle with your whatever holding you back from progressing. So
Steffi in chat room would just say, I wonder if there are different levels within the astral realm.
Well, I can't say anything about that because I haven't experienced it, and I don't like to talk about things I haven't personally experienced. But I would expect that, yes, you would progress. I mean, I've studied the Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah talks about different levels, and that you're basically purging yourself. I think that's where purgatory comes from, of each of these various stages that we accumulate in this lifetime before you can progress. So some people might cast it off, somebody who's, shall we say, enlightened, if you like, or a very loving person might cast off their physical persona very quickly and ascend into the light. Others might go through this purging process one stage at a time, I can imagine.
Were you aware of the time passing differently?
No, because this was like literally flying across the sea, seeing that in that particular instance that my relatives were fine and coming back. So I suppose it'd be like being in a jet plane almost. I mean, it was pretty quick, minutes, I suppose it would be. There was no sense of time because it was in a sort of dream state, but it wasn't a dream.
Yeah, I know. It's happened to me in the past, and I seem to have gone back on the bed and just connected as though it jerked back into my body.
That's right, a jerk. Yeah, it's not smooth. I don't know why.
And then you think, oh my God, what happened there?
Yeah.
But it really happens, like you said, it happens to loads of people. Some people don't realize it's happened to them.
That's right. But I think they're conditioned. I mean, for some people, they just assume it's part of their dream because maybe they go on to dream some more that night. Then when they wake up, it's confused with all the other dreams they've had and they think, well, something like that fantastic can't be real. Or sadly, they've been conditioned by their religion, perhaps, that says, only saints have these experiences, not ordinary people. But of course, it does happen to ordinary people all the time. And otherwise, I mean, I'm glad it does, because otherwise we'd be so preoccupied with this material world and so frightened of what I call our own shadow, our higher self, or our divine nature, whatever you want to call it, our true self, that we would just be preoccupied with what we're doing down here. And it's fine to be preoccupied with what we're doing down here. We have to survive and learn whatever we have to, clear our karma or whatever you believe down here. But to think that is all there is, I think is very limiting and rather sad, because once you do have a sense of we'll call it the supernatural, or the greater reality of which we are all a part, you'll have peace of mind. You won't be frightened of death. You won't think there's something out there that's, that you're what happens to you is determined by some mischievous being or some devil, some sentient thing. You realize that you are the highest. This is what I try to put into my books, that you are the highest level of being that there is in the universe. That's not an arrogance. It's part of the Kabbalah tradition that we are part. God is everything that exists. It's not a being. It's everything that exists, and we're all this, if you like, what would you call it? Molecule of this greater being, if you like. And God is in a state. I don't want to get into that sort of, but God is in a state of becoming. Everything is getting better. Now, you wouldn't know that from what's going on in the world at the moment, I admit. But if you look at the big picture, shall we say, of evolution, spiritual evolution, we are progressing, and if you have this positive attitude, good things will come to you, because you won't block them off with this negative feeling. Yes, we're right to be afraid of certain things. We're right to be cautious. That's survival. That's necessary. But to be negative and to look for other people to blame for things that are happening to you and all this other stuff is what's getting in our way of evolving and understanding. Because the more we're open to these kind of experiences, and this is only one of them, the more insight we'll gain, because our higher self, if you like, will have a stronger connection to. We're making a stronger connection to the higher self. We're not saying the Paul Roland or the Bob Brown is the real person. We're saying this is the shell I'm wearing at the moment, and I'm learning through this, and I'm interacting with people through this, because I couldn't interact in the spirit with another spirit in the same way. I need to be here. I need to compromise, to get on in the world. I need to, in the Kabbalah, they say the great thing is to have a family. So you can compromise, you have all the troubles, you grow together, you make mistakes and all the rest, and you learn through all this. And it's all very, very positive. And the overall picture, if people are worried about the state of things as they are, the spiritual tradition, all its permutations, they all share this thing, that it's a positive growth evolution that we're going through. And yes, we're going through a bumpy bit at the moment, to say at least maybe 2 steps back and 1 step forward. But the more you open yourself to psychic, paranormal, supernatural, whatever you want to call them, experiences, the more you will learn, the less fear you will have. That's if you were asking me, that's my experience. The more I went into it, the more I trusted it, the more I trusted my intuition, the stronger was the connection with the higher self, the more coincidences happened. And I realized they were not merely coincidences, that you get this better understanding of why things happen to you, why things are not happening for you, perhaps, why you've made certain choices, and all this sort of thing. So I don't want to get too highfalutin about it if we want to stay on the paranormal and the psychic and the spooky stuff. But
Well,
behind it all is this very positive thing, and I wish people would grasp that, because they'd be much happier. They have more peace of mind, and then they would start to have more of these kind of experiences.
Yeah. There's Stephen here saying, "Hi, Paul. Do you think animals can astro travel?"
Well, I don't know about that, but I would certainly say that animals have a soul. So if we can do it, they would. I mean, animals are such loving. Anybody who's got a pet would agree, I'm sure. Animals, you look into an animal's face, unless it's an aggressive tiger or something who wants to eat you, and you'll see a loving soul looking out at you. If you've got any empathy with an animal which is a domesticated animal, should we say? I suppose even a fox or whatever. Yeah, of course they are. They're all part of the living fabric of life in the universe. Yes, absolutely.
What about when people say they die and they pass over?
Mm-hmm.
Some people have terrible situations going over, and some go towards the light, and sometimes they go to the light, but it's not their turn, and they go back again.
Well, I think if it's not their turn, that's not a negative thing. They've been shown what awaits them, and then they've been given a second chance, if you like. So I wouldn't see that as a negative thing. But from what I've read, I did one book solely about this called "I Remember Dying." It's probably long out of print, and
Right.
I'm not promoting any of my books because I'm not on a royalty. I'm doing this simply because I want to reassure people that this is a very positive, happy thing, and they should trust their intuition, not necessarily do things on their own. Let's make this point. If anybody, well, first of all, actually, there's a very important thing. If anybody has any psychological issues, or if they're on strong medication or anything, they should consult their doctor or some other medical professional before doing anything like meditation. I always put that caveat in the beginning, on the front of my books. I think that's very important, because this is a psychological journey you're going to make. And if you're not grounded and centered, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. And this is what people have misinterpreted as evil things out there, dark shadows, and God knows what, elementals, God knows what they call them.
Yes.
There's nothing to fear out there, but you must be grounded, you must be centered. And I would advise, if anybody asks me, I would advise them to join a group, particularly a healing group, because people who join a healing group are usually, if not always, people who have others' well-being at heart, and they have they'll welcome you, and they'll make sure you're safe, and they won't encourage you to go any further than you feel comfortable. So I think that's how I started. I'd had all these experiences that I was telling you, but I went to a healing group because I still had worries about what might be out there. And it helped me tremendously. I heard other people's experiences. They took me along at my own pace. And initially, I didn't see anything when we meditated, but then the visions, or whatever you want to call them, became very, very vivid. And lots of other things happened to me. In fact, they healed my back, which is an extraordinary experience that I had. I think if anybody doubts the supernatural, I always mention this experience. I went to a healing group, and the teacher, if you want to call him that, stood in the center of the circle, and he said, "There's somebody here that my guides are telling me needs some healing." And I thought they were going to, look after somebody else. He said, "It's you," and he pointed to me. And I had chronic backache at the time, and nobody could have known that. I was sitting down, not whining and whinging as I usually do. And he got me to stand in the center of the circle. He put one hand at the on the base of my back, and I was one under my chin. I was closed my eyes, and everybody else was just holding their hands out, sort of offering healing or whatever they were doing. And and I felt myself detached from myself. This, I think, is again this dream body inside me, sort of, dislocated. Yes, and then it came back again, but it came back aligned, and my back pain had gone. So this was an extraordinary thing that they did it because I was in pain, but I've always cited that afterwards as a primary example of proof. I mean, he wasn't proof. What doctor would have done that for me? What chiropractor could have done that without actually physically manipulating me? The guy didn't touch me. Put a couple of fingers on my back, a couple under my chin. 3 minutes later, I was cured. I mean, really, marvelous thing. So,
it is. Healing's a great tool to use on people.
I think it's a very good place to go if you're at all nervous or wary of starting your journey, rather than say going to a tarot group or something. See, the trouble is that the psychic and spiritual stuff does attract the ego people, and you get these cult leaders. I'm not talking necessarily about a cult, but you get people who want to dominate. I mean, I remember there was one guy who had all these female acolytes around him, and he did. I don't think anybody, they or him, recognized what he was doing, but he had this power over these women simply because he'd had these marvelous experiences, and he was talking all this, airy fairy nonsense, as they say, and it spoilt the whole thing because he obviously had insight, but he wasn't. This is what I always say about Crowley. You see, Crowley was an absolute egomaniac, and
he was.
Yeah, right. So, but he was irresponsible to the degree where he would put traps deliberately in his books to trip up the unwary. Now, you don't do that in a spiritual tradition if you're trying to enlighten people, educate them, whatever you want to call them. So you have a responsibility to people. It's like, going up the mountain. If you're the leader, you make sure everybody's safe behind you. Yeah,
of course you do.
He would have, raced up the mountain. Of course, he was a mountaineer too, and he not give a damn about anybody else, because he was out, for publicity. He was out to make himself an adept and all the rest of it. So I think there are little Crowleys in these groups, and you have to be wary. That's why I suggest a healing group, because it doesn't tend to attack people who are selfless. It attracts the selfish.
When you're saying all this, why do you think humans are so fascinated by ghosts across every culture?
Well, I think it's because we suspect that there's more out there. And of course, we wonder what's going to happen to us when we die, because that is an absolute certainty. Nobody's got out of that one yet. And people have. I mean, I'll tell you, I haven't seen a ghost, but I felt them many times. I felt light touching in my hair. I felt cobwebs on my face, and many times. And I've asked out loud and to myself, who's there? Or is this so and so? And I've never got an answer, which is very frustrating. But I've certainly felt that, and also I felt a presence, as my wife has, in one particular room, which used to be, I think, the previous owner's garage or something. So he was still around. You could feel him come in and stand behind you, in this house.
It's funny you saying that, because one of my questions was, why do some hauntings seem intelligent while others replay like a recording?
Sorry, I didn't get the first part. Why do
some hauntings seem intelligent while others replay like a recording?
Right. I think we've got different types of phenomena here. I think we have the conscious, disembodied spirit, which can communicate and interact with you. And we have the echo, which is when there's something violent has simply left residual energy that people with acute sensitivity, which is all psychic ability is, can tune into. So if you're very sensitive, acutely sensitive, uncommonly so, you would be sensitive to atmosphere, and you might see or hear. Remember, there's clairaudience, there's clairvoyance, and clairsentience. There's different types. So people will experience a haunting, in different ways, depending on their own faculties, their own sensitivity. They might see something, might hear something, they might simply feel something. And so I think we're not talking about a single phenomenon. We're talking about different variations on a similar sort of thing. That's why I'm saying most people, I believe, I'm not taking anything for an absolute fact, because in Kabbalah you're supposed to say, it is my understanding that, because I think, yeah, you must, because you're not preaching to anybody, and you're not trying to convert anybody. You're simply saying, this is my experience, what do you think? And I would say, that most people, when they die, they progress either quickly or slowly through these stages. But some people, clearly, from all the encounters we have recorded, some people are earthbound. Either maybe they just don't want to let go of their loved ones. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but it's a negative thing for them, because the loved ones have to let them go so that they can progress. If the loved ones are in a state of what do we call it, unnatural grieving, they would tend to cling on. So it's not healthy for either party, if you like. And then, of course, we have the people who've got guilt they need to unburden themselves of, and so they literally are carrying these things that are like chains. Well, that's why you get these cliche things of ghosts with chains, because they are carrying chains, in the sense that they're burdened with. That's what I'm saying. It's all psychological, because it's. Oh, the other thing the astral body is called is the emotional body, and I think that's the key to this. If you think about it, our mind, our consciousness, is probably what we would call the soul. The emotional part of our being is the denser part, and that's what can trap us here if we can't shake it off, if we can't accept. A lot of people. That's the other thing, of course. There are a certain number of people who probably don't realize they are dead. This is a phenomenon too. There are people who are so trapped in a routine. It might be going to work. It could be. Imagine prisoners or people in a gulag or something. If they died there, they probably would never believe that they were free. They're so conditioned. They're so trapped there that it could take them. We have no idea of time, of course, in this reality. But it could take them hundreds of years, maybe dozens of years, maybe just weeks. I don't know. But that would explain why people from another time might be seen. But I think when you see, when people have reported ghostly armies, for example, I think that is an echo, because I can't conceive that X hundred men killed at a certain time and place would all be trapped there. Surely not. I think that is simply a residual energy in the air. That's why they're repeating the same actions, the same fighting, but the people themselves have long gone. That's also why they don't react. Sorry, that's why they also don't interact with the people who see this phenomenon. Whereas when you do have an interaction, it's usually with a grandfather or somebody who hasn't departed that long, who still has a link to and can presume, maybe they're between worlds or something, or maybe it may be like in sleep, where we go into a different state. I'm not saying we're going to a different place, a different state of consciousness, and maybe they go into some sort of sleep state there, and in that state the two minds meet. I'll tell you one, if I may, one very quick story which might give a clue. I don't know, maybe 10, maybe 15 or so years ago, I woke up one morning and I heard my aunt's voice say, "Auntie so-and-so is dead, dear." Now, if you hear somebody's voice in your head, it's usually your own, and you're saying their words, but it's your voice, right? But this was her voice, which I'd never experienced before. So I phoned my mother and I said, "I don't want to worry you, but I heard your sister say, 'Auntie so-and-so is dead, dear.'" So my mother phoned her flat. There was no answer. She phoned the hospital where my uncle had been taken and assumed that my aunt had gone there to visit him. She hadn't been there for a day or two. So my mother phoned the police. The police knocked on the flat door, couldn't get in, broke in, found her lying on the floor. She'd had a aneurysm or something similar to that. So she was in a coma type state. And in
Yeah.
that state, she could communicate with me because I was asleep or coming out of sleep. And just at that split second, the two minds meet. Now, of course, my mother and my sister were very psychically connected because they were younger sisters. They were very, emotionally linked. They weren't twins, but they were connected. And so it could be that my mother's son, me, also had a connection with my aunt. And so she reached out to me. I don't know. I don't have to explain it. All I know is it happened and it saved her life. Now, that's because there's another thing I've just remembered, which I must tell you. This is why you need to trust your intuition, because it gets stronger and stronger if you do. Once I was, my parents were going to take my young children, as they usually did on a weekend for something, and that same day I closed my eyes. I was resting. It was just a Sunday, and I saw a lot of flashing lights, like blue lights. I couldn't see any details, like it was in the dark. So I wasn't seeing a scene of something that was going to happen, but I obviously got a glimpse of this. Anyway, so when my mother phoned and said, "Oh, we'd like to take the children out this afternoon," I said, "No, thank. I think we don't want to do that this time." And that's when my mother and father had this terrible car accident, and they went off a bridge, and my mother had to be helicoptered to the hospital. Nearly lost her leg. It all was fine in the end. But imagine if my children had been in that car, and the only thing that saved them, I mean, whether they were injured or whether they were simply traumatized, would have been bad enough. But the thing was, I saw those flashing lights, and I trusted this meant something, and I should act on it. Thank goodness.
Correct.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you there. You should always do that. Rebecca's in chat room. She said, "What's your opinion on shadow figures, please?"
Well, I don't have one because I don't really know what we're referring to. Are we talking about sort of ghosts?
Yeah, shadow. Yeah, they're coming through. You can see them, but they're all in black.
No, I haven't experienced anything like that, so I wouldn't really comment on that. But it sounds like that it's the perception of the person who's seeing them rather than the nature of the phenomenon. I think they're interpreting through their own third eye, if you like, a presence of a disembodied spirit, and that's how they see it, as a shadow. Because in one of my ghost books, I say that there's I tell of the incident where there's two women who both see the same ghost in the same place on the same day. One of them sees the top half, and I think the other one sees the whole figure, if I remember rightly. So I think that sort of explains it. It depends what your degree of perception is. Yeah,
believe it or not, that happens with a lot of cases, and a lot of UFO cases where three of you could be stood there, but you'll all have a different opinion what you're seeing.
Well, the UFO thing is interesting because I think, well, I don't want to get into an argument with anybody, but my feeling is that it's an out of body, because when you're talking about being taken up into the craft, it sounds like an out of body experience that people interpret as an alien abduction because that is socially acceptable now. If people talked about going out of their body, they might fear they're going to be laughed at in this day and age. In the biblical times, they talked about these things because it was socially acceptable then. So I think it might simply be that. I don't want to get into UFOs and aliens and things, but I wonder, let's say I wonder if that might be a more likely explanation for some of these encounters. But
well, everybody has their opinion, should I say?
Yes, quite. Well, that's why I wouldn't say anything against it. But that's my time worth,
Do ghost sightings suggest consciousness survives death?
Yes. It's a short answer. Next question.
Do you think some spirits appear unable to move on?
Sorry, I didn't catch the very first bit.
Why do you think some spirits appear unable to move on?
I think we covered that before. It's either an emotional burden, if you like. They might feel guilt about something that they haven't said or haven't done, or they've left something important and they need their relative to find the thing, the missing will or the money or whatever it happens to be, or the body, for goodness sake, could be, or that they, as I say, that they might not even realize that they're dead. If they're in some routine thing where they can't conceive of another reality, and it isn't until they get the same answer from the same person over and over again that they think, wait a minute, am I dreaming or something else? And then that might snap them out of it. So I think I don't think it's a hopeless thing. I think it sounds very depressing and whatnot, but I think in the end somebody will come from the other side and get them. If somebody on this side doesn't intervene, with some clearing or some other sort of ritual, and contacts them and say to them, don't be frightened, go towards the light and that sort of thing.
Oh no, people say that as well. I've heard of that before.
Mm.
Go to the light. It's like going to somebody's house and said there's a ghost in here. It don't want to go over.
Yeah.
But after a bit, if you connect with them, they will see the light and go.
Yes.
It just takes a bit of time sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think could science eventually prove the existence of ghosts?
That's a really interesting question. I've just finished a novel about that very question, where somebody finds wax cylinder recordings from seances in the 1920s when Conan Doyle and his friends were conducting seances, and they collaborate with this ghost in the hope that he or she will reveal the mysteries of life after death, but they never do they? That's the point. Now, why can't they? A lot of people, cynics, will say it's because they're not real ghosts, and these people are being fooled by the clairvoyant. And we know that was a prevalent thing of seances, particularly in the Victorian era, that there were a lot of charlatans around. However, I think it's the genuine ones who the genuine contacts that genuine psychics make, and yet seem to give what you might call trivial information, and not answering the big questions about where are you and what's it like over there. I think it's simply because the ghosts, the spirits they're communing with, don't have that information because they're not in that state. It's a bit like if I said to you, if I could commune with you in your sleep, and I'd say, where are you? You might describe the scene that you're imagining, or you might say, I don't know. I'm not, I don't know where I am, because you're dreaming. You're in a different state, of a mental state. So I don't think it's fair to dismiss or seances, clairvoyance, connections, and so on as false, simply because they talk about mundane things. How is Auntie Agatha? And I hope your children are doing well at school. If they're earthbound spirits, they probably would be preoccupied with those thoughts. If they were in the higher levels, they wouldn't be communicating with you in the first place. I think that's the important thing. If they could, they might describe these states, and if they did, it might be like in the Bible where they talked in symbols. There was a bit rough on the Bible, but I can't remember who it is, who had the chariot, saw the chariot with the lion and the different animals, and that this was all symbolic of states of being and levels in the hierarchy of the heavens, if you like.
Right.
Because these things this is, I think, the gist of it. These things are beyond our comprehension. With the brain that we have, and we only use a very small part of it, so we may still evolve. And this is an interesting subject in itself. We may evolve one day into perceiving these things without mediums. We might be able to do it ourselves, but we're obviously not at that stage of evolution yet, physically or spiritually. So I think we simply, if those people who have had a glimpse of the workings of the universe are either driven slightly mad by it, or they simply can't take it all in because of its nature. Its nature is so great that you can't put it into words, you'd probably have to have a mathematical formula or something, and we don't understand that, those of us not very well educated. So I think it's not an easy out that I'm saying. I'm simply saying that in fact, from what I've gathered from these accounts of these kind of experiences, where people see, the great wheel of the universe turning, and it all makes sense to them at the moment, like it does in a dream. It all makes complete sense at that moment. But you come back into your body and try and process that with your little brain, you just can't. I mean, imagine think about what we are able to comprehend. Those of us who are not. Who's that mathematical genius who died, who was disabled? You know who I mean?
Oh God, yeah.
This escapes me. Never mind. He's a Cambridge Don, yes. And people like Richard Feynman, the great physicist. These people had incredible insights and understanding, and yet, and they could explain things that it just goes right over our heads. We couldn't grasp it, even if they were standing explaining it to us. And I think you're talking about an even greater reality. I think we have to be fair and not try and not be so dismissive of people who have had experiences simply because it all seems too much. If they've had that experience and they know it, that's a fact to them. But I've explained my experience as far as I'm able to you, and I think because mine was a very simple experience, you've understood what I'm saying. But until you actually experienced it, you couldn't, because the sensation is something I cannot put into words. I talked about it being a liberating experience, an exhilarating experience, and a natural one, but it's flying. Now, we all know, we've all probably had dreams of flying, and that's what it's like. And you can't believe that it's actually happening, but it's absolutely natural when it's happening, right? But a lot of people will wake up and say, no, that can't be real. And yet they had it. So I think...
How about that, where I've been flying down a tunnel? Absolutely flying. Wow. And I've gone further and further and further. And then all of a sudden I've gone, bang, back in bed.
Yeah. There you are.
And then bang, and then all of a sudden I woke up and I thought, what the hell was that? A good question for you here. What percentage of paranormal reports do you think are genuinely unexplained?
Well, I wouldn't even go into that. It's, I mean, there are so many that are believable, credible, and I wouldn't question them. I just take out of them what I feel is significant, what adds to another piece to the jigsaw puzzle, if you like. And when I have an experience, I put it in my back pocket, so to speak. I don't go around blagging about it. I think, okay, good. That's another experience I've got. It revealed X, to me, and I wait for the next piece of the puzzle, and see if I can then come up with some sort of theory. But I found my answers in the Kabbalah because it held up to every kind of query that I could challenge, that I could put to it. It basically says that if you want to understand what is out there, you have to look inside you, because you're a reflection of the same thing. All the divine attributes that you have, we all have, are out there. And if you look at let's say the seasons, the seasons it's a cycle, life is a cycle. Things never die, they transform. So they might appear to die, as when plants die, but they turn, they leave their seed and they come back again, and so on and so forth, or they just flower. And I think the clues to all our questions are out there, right in front of our eyes, in fact. And if we want more answers, we simply look within. We meditate, contemplate, try and connect with your guides, try and connect with your higher self, however you want to, God, whatever you want to believe in, Jesus, or whatever it is, Buddha, whatever. And they say, you only have to knock and you'll get the answer. And I think that is true. That if you are sincere in your quest, you'll get the answers. They might not be what you're expecting, but you'll get them. You might get them in the form of an experience. You might not get something that moment, but when you go to sleep at night, when you're more open, something might pop into your head. It might be a visual clue, or it might be an experience, rather than a straight answer. But I think we are not left in the dark if we choose to take that step with confidence, without fear, and if we expect an answer. We have every right to expect an answer. We're not here to suffer in the dark. When the Buddhists talk about life is suffering, all they mean it's separation from the source. They don't mean it's a life of pain, although unfortunately a lot of people do go through that. They mean we're separated from the source, from our our true being, whatever you want to call it, and therefore we have a very limited understanding of what's going on, and therefore we misinterpret certain experiences as things happening to us. Oh my goodness, I didn't get that job, or why do I keep marrying the wrong person, or whatever it is. Well, that's because we're doing this to ourselves. Nothing out there is doing this to us. To go back to the original point, I hope that I haven't gone too far from your question.
Do you think things have happened in this life has happened in a previous life then?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I've had memories of past lives that arrived spontaneously without me. I mean, no, I won't go into that. But there was no. I just mean, you can of course trigger a past life regression, and if you're grounded and centered, as I said before, that's a perfectly safe and legitimate inner journey to make, and you might be quite surprised what comes out. Or you can do it with a past life regression therapist, or just a friend, somebody you trust, though. Somebody's not going to wind you up or take advantage of the fact that you're in this meditative state.
Yes.
But I've had experiences where, I mean, all right, I'll tell you, I used to have this sort of obsession almost about hanging, particularly in the Regency period, the highwaymen being hung, and I put it in my various songs. I couldn't get it out of my head, really. Over 30 years or something I was doing this. I mean, not every album was about being hung, but I just mean it was a recurring preoccupation. However, one day I was washing my hair. I put the towel over my head to dry my hair, and I saw a vision of somebody in a hood hanging outside a city wall, and the emotion came right up. It was really powerful, and after that, I was never interested, if I can use the word, in hanging again. I'd exorcised it, but I didn't do anything to do that. I wasn't thinking about that. I was washing my hair. I wasn't in a spiritual mood of any kind. But obviously, it was the right time. This had been building up, or whatever, I suppose, simmering.
Yes.
So that's how. Yeah, that's how sometimes how ridiculous these things can come, and then you're clear of it, and you feel great. This thing you've been carrying from life to life, going back to your question, is gone in a flash. So and this is because I'm okay. Somebody's asking, does your version of reincarnation include a god?
Paul.
Right. Well, I would say, if I may, God doesn't really come into this because we're all God. I think Sai Baba said, "I'm God, you're God. The only difference is that I know it and you don't." I think God is simply a life force, the universal life force, that the great power that creates everything and keeps everything alive, and thankfully regenerates all the rubbish we've done to the earth and all the rest of it. The life force, if you like, is all powerful and will always win no matter what we do. But I think the clue is there. Why are your prayers not? Well, your prayers can be answered because you can do things that the higher self and your guides can intervene and do things if you pray. But if you're praying to God, most people say my prayers don't get answered. Well, that's because he's not out there listening, and he's certainly not going to intervene for you. But that doesn't mean you're helpless here. As I said, your guides, your higher self will intervene and give you the answer and attract the right thing, bring you out of trouble, give you peace of mind and all the rest of it. Okay, somebody says, I want to know how you can get off of the
reincarnation wheel. Maybe I'm not going to the light.
Right. No, I think, first of all, because it's a natural evolution thing, you cannot harm yourself. You cannot drag yourself back. You will evolve. You will pass into the light. Whatever you think, even if you're a Satanist or whatever you are, a triple murderer, eventually, because they don't get away with it. Eventually, they will go because we all have that divine spark. So whatever we've done as a human being, this is cast off. This is where we get purgatory and hell from. Obviously, we do go through some sort of purging process, and if we've been a real nasty bastard, it's going to be pretty bad, and serves you right. But in the end, everything in that sense is forgiven. You can't do these things without repercussions to yourself and to others. That's the mistake a lot of these people make. However, in the end, and the end may be a long time coming, you will ascend because you are all part of, you're all perfect. That which is perfect cannot make anything which is imperfect. That's why there's no evil in the world. People are evil. Evil is the counter impulse to evolution. So anybody who's acting against the greater good is evil, but there is no evil being out there. So to answer your question, how do you get off the reincarnation wheel? It's enlightenment. It's realizing and being continually aware of your divine nature and the divine nature in everybody and everything else. That's very important. That's how you get to the Christ consciousness or the Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, that you must, self-realization, if you want. It may take many, many lifetimes, but it will happen. Believe me, that's my promise. It will happen because you have to be a pretty awful person and to have done many awful things to other people to delay this process, because that's all will happen. That's my understanding, that you can only delay it, but you're entitled as a divine being to go back to the source eventually. It just might be a difficult process if you've been a real soul.
After everything you have seen and researched, what do you now believe happens after we die?
Well, we're going back to the question at the beginning, really. I think we go through this purging process, which might be quite harmless, if you like. I mean, you might just soar up there. I mean, I didn't sense any, of course, I wasn't having a near-death experience, but when I did have out-of-body experiences, I didn't sense anything that would restrain my progress. In fact, there was one dream in which, and it wasn't a dream, sorry, one experience in which I was really close to the source, but I chickened out because I didn't know what I might see. And this is the trouble. It's this persona again, this worldly you that says, oh no, I mustn't do that. I might not be able to get back. But the opportunity was there, Okay, I'm a spiritually minded person and I've done a lot of stuff and I've written a lot. So I have, and I don't know how many lifetimes I've had. None of us do. So maybe I'm ready to go. It doesn't mean I'm a better person. It just means, I've been around maybe more lifetimes than somebody else. And this is my big thing. This is what I think about a lot of the time. Although I struggle with it, normal things in the normal world like everybody else does. So I think it depends at what stage of your evolution you are at, as to how many lives you might have, but you'll all get off the wheel. And it's not something you have to try. It's not something you have to struggle. In fact, all these exercises, all these experiences don't come from effort. I think that's a very important thing to say. It's about opening yourself up, being receptive in a safe environment, which I also must stress. So it's a bit like, I always say, it's like slipping into a warm, perfumed bath. It should be that easy to go into a meditative state and experience all these other things. It's not something where you put effort into, because if you force something, and I once forced, when I was a teenager, I wanted to trigger an out-of-body experience at will. And I tried to do this in the daytime, forcing this. I knew you could do it, but it caused me a lot of psychological problems, especially as The Exorcist was being shown at the time. And I saw somebody,
oh my God.
I saw somebody being exorcised and shaking. That put the fear of what's it into me. And so I thought there was something dreadful out there, or that something might enter my body, you see. So once you shake off all that nonsense, which the media have created. I mean, it's a great ghost horror story, and that's fine. I love the film; it's very funny. But no, it really is. If you don't believe in it, you just laugh all the way through it. But in fact, that's the attitude really I would encourage. You have to take everything very lightly. I mean, you see the Buddhists smiling all the time. Why are they smiling? Because they know that life is, here today, gone tomorrow, and they'll go on forever. The real you goes on forever. It's nothing to worry about. Of course, we all worry about trivial
totally
things.
agree.
But that's completely natural. I hope that's answered it.
Got about 5 minutes left. What you got planned for the future? I know you got a book coming out.
Well, no. I've gone to writing fiction with paranormal, supernatural, psychic elements in it. I've drawn on my own experiences and those of others, but they're a very, well, I won't say they're a very small element, but I feel it's my duty, if you like, obligation to what's the word, to reassure people the sort of things I've been telling you tonight, but I've put them into fictional form so that it's just one element and you don't feel this is somebody preaching to me. But I've stopped writing non-fiction. I did all those mind, body, spirit books back in the 90s and early 2000s. I think I did about 50 books altogether. I mean, with true crime and other things as well.
Yeah.
So now that I'm an old geezer, I'm putting my time and energy into my own sort of creation. I feel like I've told everybody, all I had, and now I'm doing it through fiction to reach a different sort of readership. And I'm continuing with my own music as well, which also has an element of the supernatural, though I tend to be rather whimsical about that.
When you're writing music, do you put some paranormal stuff in it then?
Yeah, but I'm usually making fun of people like Crowley and Montague Summers, and because they were such larger than life characters and they needed a good kicking, So in my songs, I don't take them very seriously. I've done pretty serious songs, but usually it's easier to be funny about these people, and they are sort of almost cartoon characters, In the books, though, that it's people have the same experiences as I've had or my friends have had, people I trust, and that adds to the mystery. But again, if you were reading it, I think you'd be reassured. There's nothing scary. My ghost stories don't have negative ghosts, except unless they're troubled spirits, and then they're usually helped.
Where can people buy your books, and where can people get your music?
Well, I've got a Bandcamp site, which is where I like people, and I'd like people to write to me. I'd really like to communicate with people if they're interested.
Yeah.
It's paul-roland.bandcamp.com, and you'll find my books on Amazon. And I've also got a website. I think it's Paul Roland Info, or it's paulroland.net. I think it is actually the author site. But as I say, I'm not writing them anymore. I'm not profiting from them because I'm not on any royalty. But if you can probably pick them up in one of these remainder shops, for a bag of chips, as they say, cheapest chips. Do have a look, because there's a lot of stuff in there. Particularly, I Remember Dying, which Colin Wilson, the author, wrote a foreword to. I felt that book, of all my books, is something that would open people's minds, take the fear out of the unknown, and encourage them to explore in a safe environment these kind of things. It's a good starting point. And there's also one called How Psychic Are You, which is a sort of different approach with different exercises. So and even the ghost books, I don't really put anything nasty in there because I don't well, I certainly don't want to perpetuate that kind of myth. I think there's enough people perpetuating that kind of myth that the supernatural is dodgy and unnatural, which it certainly is not.
Okay, no problem. Anyway, it's been very interesting speaking with you tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's been good, yeah. I love questions from the chat room as well, besides my own questions. So it's been fascinating. I've loved interviewing you tonight. and get to know a little bit more about you.
Oh, well, I'm glad to have been given the chance to spread my wisdom.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Right.
Yeah, I did have a guest for Friday. Just trying to get somebody else for Friday now. Unfortunately, one of the guests is not doing any podcasts ever again.
Oh.
He only told me at last minute.
Oh.
Unfortunately, but that's what happens when you're doing podcasts regular. But it doesn't matter. I'll try and get somebody for tomorrow night. I'm hoping to get Agi Nosh on, a good friend of mine from America. Is from Norway originally, but he's a great guy and he always fits me in somewhere. So hopefully he'll be on Friday night, the 15th.
Okay. Right. Good luck with that.
Oh, yes. Thank you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody in the chat room as well.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Bye.